going to go pretty quickly through this section because of the fact that you guys got most of this information when you were biology students. I know that was a while ago, but you will remember some of that stuff. The cell, each cell in the human body consists of three parts: the plasma membrane, which we call the cell membrane, cytoplasm, and a nucleus, except for the red blood cell. It's the only cell in the human body that does not have a nucleus. The plasma membrane separates the inside from the outside. It's maintaining boundaries like we talked about in the last chapter, and it is making sure that everything inside the cell is running smoothly and not being interfered by the extracellular stuff. One of the things that you did not learn in biology was this next word. It's called glycocalyx, which is a sugar-coated protein that allows for cells to recognize one another and figure out what their job is. So it's just a marker on the outside of the cell membrane that allows them to communicate with one another. In biology, we did talk about this. The cell membrane or plasma membrane is considered to be a fluid mosaic model. It is a double layer of lipids. They're a specific lipid called a phospholipid, and they always line up tail to tail, and their heads are on the outside. And they're special proteins because they have their head likes water. It's considered to be polar, and their tails do not like water, and they consider to be nonpolar. And so this helps with the integrity of the cell membrane. It also helps with the passage of materials in or out of the cell. Within the cell membrane, you also have proteins. We have two main types of proteins in the cell membrane. We have an integral protein, and we have, well, we'll get to the next one, sorry. So the integral proteins, they are the proteins that go all the way through the cell membrane. They have a part that's on the outside of the cell membrane. They also have a part that's on the inside. And these are going to be involved in transporting different molecules, ions, electrolytes, in or out of the cell. The peripheral proteins are the second type of protein that we're going to talk about, and these proteins are just on the outside of the cell membrane, and they are not embedded. They don't go all the way through, and they are usually just considered to be enzymes. Now, in biology, we learned about diffusion. Simple diffusion is where things can pass straight through the cell membrane without having to use any sort of transport protein. So they are going to be lipid-soluble molecules, or very, very teeny tiny molecules that can get through the cell membrane without any help and without ripping the cell membrane apart. When we're talking about passive membrane transport, we're talking about transport that does not take the cell any extra energy. This is happening just with molecule movement and going from high concentration to low concentration. Facilitated diffusion, you need a transport protein. So one of those integral proteins that go all the way through, these are usually things that are still going to be moving from high concentration to low concentration, but are a little bit bigger, and maybe even a polar molecule that doesn't go through the cell membrane as easily. It's still going to be going from high to low concentration, but just needs a carrier protein. So the carrier proteins are integral proteins going all the way through the cell membrane, and they show specificity for certain polar molecules, meaning that they have a certain shape, and there's only certain shaped objects that can go through that protein. So this is showing you a picture of simple diffusion. Simple diffusion is where it does not need a protein at all, and it's going to go from high to low concentration, and these are going to be lipid-soluble proteins, lipid-soluble solutes that are able to get through the nonpolar tail of the phospholipid molecule. This is showing you diffusion through a protein. And so this is showing you a type of diffusion. Again, no energy is needed, and it is allowing for molecules to go through, but you do need that integral protein in order for it to work. Another passive transport system is osmosis, and osmosis is specific diffusion for water. It only has to do with water. Water is the only thing involved when it comes to osmosis. And it is going to allow for water to move in or out of the cell depending on what's going on in the cell and what is needed at the time. Now, water molecules can get into or out of the cell sometimes on their own, even though they're considered to be polar, and the lipid tails do not mix well with them. Other times they need an actual protein carrier. Again, it is passive transport, no energy is needed, and they get through with a specific protein called an aquaporin. Now, when it comes to water in the cell and outside the cell, water is constantly moving in or out, and you want it in equilibrium. If it is in equilibrium with the solutes that are dissolved in the water that, or I guess in the water outside and inside the cell, then it's considered to be an isotonic solution. So things are flowing in or out of the cell nicely, but in an equilibrium. If the cell is in a hypertonic solution, what is going to happen in that case is the cell is going to shrivel. The water is going to go outside of the cell, and we are going to end up having a shriveled cell. Hypotonic is the exact opposite, where the water is going to be coming into the cell, and because the solute concentration isn't in equilibrium, and so it will bloat. The cell will end up bloating. Next, we will talk about active transport, and active transport needs energy to get any sort of solute from outside to inside the cell, or vice versa, inside to out. It always is going to require a carrier protein, one of those integral proteins, and we are going to be moving substances against the concentration gradient, meaning that they're going to go from low concentration, from high concentration, sorry again, they're going to be moving from low concentration to high concentration, which isn't the normal movement of molecules. The last type of transport that we'll talk about is vesicular transport. We have little vesicles inside our cells that are going to transport larger molecules across the plasma membrane without allowing the plasma membrane to rip open and spew its contents out. The first type is exocytosis, and exo means outside, and endo means going into the cell. So exocytosis, we're moving substances that are inside the cell to the outside, and endocytosis from the outside to inside. There are two types of endocytosis. The first type is phagocytosis, where we're going to take in some sort of solid, large molecule or bacteria and bring it into the cell's interior so that we can digest it, use it, kill it, whatever is needed. And then penocytosis is where we're going to be bringing in fluid from outside the cell inside the cell. We call phagocytosis cell eating and penocytosis cell drinking. So the first picture is just showing you exocytosis, where we're going to wrap a vesicle around whatever that molecule may be, and then we're going to spew it outside the cell. And then phagocytosis, they're showing this cell is engulfing some sort of particle and bringing it into the cell. In this case, it's a bacterium, and we would then destroy that bacteria. So there are a bunch of different types of transport systems. We have simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, osmosis. We didn't really talk about filtration, but that is an important thing when we get a little bit further into this class. And then we also have active transport, where we have exocytosis, endocytosis, penocytosis, and just regular active transport.